Welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful marketing strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. We have another great episode today, so don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, here's your host, physical therapist, marketing expert, and CEO of Practice Promotions, Neil Trickett.
Hello, and welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett. I'm the CEO of Practice Promotion, and today's focus, we're going to talk about bringing positivity and energy back into your clinic. And so I'm really happy to have a good friend here, Mike Nula. Michael, he's the founder and director of Nula Training Systems. He's actually, been a practice owner and built up a very successful practice. So we're really fortunate to have Mike on here. So Mike, great to have you here.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be here.
Awesome. Can you give everybody just a little bit about your background and what you were able to achieve in the PT world?
Yeah, well, so probably like many of us, I fell in love with physical therapy, having a personal experience. I had a bad knee injury in high school that derailed my basketball career. But quickly fell in love with the field of physical therapy, and pretty much everything after that was about becoming a physical therapist and owning my own practice. I'm a teacher at heart. My mother's a former high school teacher. My father being an HR guy, they kind of guided me along. And I was actually a high school teacher before I went back to school for PT. But that teacher coach at heart always lived in me. So, fast forward, I started Elite Physical Therapy and grew my physical therapy practice to 15 locations, 13 clinics, and 2 aquatherapy centers before integrating with Ivy Rehab Network after 20 years of doing that, and provided a pathway for me to pursue some other passions. So back to teaching, right? Teaching, coaching. So I have my executive coaching and professional development firm, Nula Training Systems. I'm a part-time professor also at Johnson & Wales University, where we're starting a PT program.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the podcast today. It's great to be able to pick your brain and share your wisdom with our audience here. So, Mike, we've definitely seen a lot of changes being in the therapy world here for decades. Right. So as you're working with lots of practices around the country here, what are some of the biggest problems and challenges that you're seeing practice owners face today?
Yeah. And that word problem right away, I think of stress and anxiety, right? So what brings us stress? What brings us anxiety? And a lot of that's linked to we're uncertain about something. And that uncertainty starts to find its way in when we don't really have a clear approach or a path. Maybe it's something being presented that we don't know, haven't seen before, or it's maybe bigger than we think it is. But it's usually like a lack of a consistent approach, a plan. And so a lot of times what I'm seeing with practice owners is, they're busy, they're grinding, they're just trying to get through the weeks, the days, and just make the best of everything. And in that process of grinding, I see a pattern where it's more reactive rather than responding. And so this idea of having a plan, a strategy that can be responding versus just putting out fires sometimes. And we've all been pulled into flows like that and scenarios like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you're saying there too, like the proactivity versus the reactivity is huge. And I think, like you said, I definitely see that too, where people having to be very reactive to let's say it's been a crazy couple of years, right? So that's part of business, right? Is having to be reactive to things, but there's also the time that you can plan and be proactive with stuff too. And I think too, what it comes down to at the end of the day is control.
Yeah.
Right. So the more that you can control your business versus your business controlling you, the happier you're going to be, right? There's more positivity and all that you can enjoy in your business. So,
yeah.
So I know that, obviously you've done a lot to grow your business where it was. And so I think that we have talked before about like systems, right? So I know that you're a big proponent of building systems into your business. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, systems aren't always necessarily softwares, right? So systems has way more to do with steps, procedures, and a process of doing things. And what I love about systems is it's a way to organize your practice, and not just, the global systems, but like there's a way to go into every sort of, vertical within the practice, right? We know we have verticals like clinical, right? That then the quality of the clinical, the learning, the education, the development, the HR, then the marketing, right? Like, so all of these systems and approaches to doing things. And, what that does is, to your point, you get more control, and that's linked with more prediction, right? So much like feeling like you're in control of your patient caseload, it's because you have a high level of prediction. You have a systematic approach of approaching how you're going to assess the patient, review their history, go through your clinical findings, and on the other side, come out with a diagnosis and an intervention, a plan of care, a frequency, a duration, and then be able to package that and educate it to the patient in a way that they're paying attention, they are understanding you, and you're not blowing them out of the water with big words and a lot of detail, but enough that they're understanding it and they can get behind it. So similarly, we cross over and use those same neural circuits, but executively with our practice. And when we do that consistently, man, it feels good. We're in control, and we're fulfilling kind of the vision that we had for starting our practice, right?
Yeah. I love how you said that systems are not technology necessarily, right?
Yeah.
It's actual processes, right? Systems of processes too. It's just a great way to kind of view that. And I would imagine too, like in some of the practices that you coach, do you see that like the individuals within those practices, not necessarily the business owners, but like the therapist or managers, like do they grasp that there's other systems in that business, or is that kind of a weak point for a lot of clinics?
Yeah, so I see kind of twofold. I see it's a weak point in the sense that maybe they don't have it all, not as many things organized as they could or should. But then it's, does everybody understand what exists and cross over, right? So, true team understands a little bit about everybody's role on the team. I'm a big basketball guy, as you know, big NBA enthusiast. And, the team that's on the court understands everybody's roles because you need to anticipate and know where everybody needs to go so you can run your plays, right? Your system, right? Phil Jackson, very famous to the Chicago Bulls, led them to 6 NBA championships and then 3 more in Los Angeles Lakers. But he had the triangle offense as his systematic approach to how they were going to move the ball, share the ball, score points. So similarly in private practice, we've got to get our series of motion offense and put points on the board, which is serving patients, caring and serving for our community at the highest level, right?
Yeah. So what happens in clinics when you start to help them systematize? What do you see happen to the practice?
They start winning, right? And so you start winning games when you've got a consistent approach, right? In basketball, and same thing in private practice, you're winning. And, we tend to measure winning like, is the team good? Are patients happy and getting better? Are they loyal to our practice? Are they referring others? Do we feel like a peace and a calm more often than not as a practice owner? Something that we look around and feel proud about. We go home at night and we put our head on the pillow and sleep well at night. And when our spouse or partner or close family or friends ask, hey, how's the practice going? We say things like, we're actually doing pretty good. We're doing really good. Group's winning. We're doing a lot of good in the community. We've been on a good roll, versus like, well, I mean, it's all right. We try to think of something polite, but it's not all right if we're saying stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So that effect, obviously, the systems of the business, right? The better that those are, the better the business does. But that does have that trickle down effect to the team, right?
Yes.
The patient care, the owner, and to the family of the owner, right? It's the stress level and the enjoyment that they're feeling from the owner, right? So do you see with lack of systems in the business? I know that like you and I have obviously been in this game a long time, and we've chatted with thousands of different practice owners over the years, right?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of practices might resonate with our audience that they might have people within the business. That's what gives them a little bit more of the stress than some of the other things, right? It's kind of dealing with the personnel and making sure that they can do their job and do those kind of things. So do you see that in that situation that the people are inherently like pretty good, and once in a while you get like a bad apple in there that kind of sneaks in, but for the most part they're pretty good, and then it's just because they don't have process is systemized and other parts that they don't completely understand. So then there's kind of like friction that happens with the personnel and stuff. Is that stuff that you see when you're training practices?
That's exactly it, right? So we start getting to work, getting some order and more organizing. And, how this all works in private practice, this whole thing's holistical, right? So much like owning a home, like you circle back on things that you got to touch again. And like painting the house, how many times do we come back? We're like, man, didn't we just paint the house like last year? But damn, we're back on it again. So in our practice, we're this holistical relationship where we're touching on things like marketing, like HR and personnel, like our treatment approaches, maybe our skill set. Are we doing Con Ed enough? Furniture, fixtures, computers, but then systems, processes, the way we roll when early on years versus as the years go on, you're tweaking and evolving, right? We're constantly adapting to our environment, right? And we know this kooky healthcare landscape is anything but simple. It's quite complex. It's continuously changing. So we change with the change, and that might have a trickle-down effect with some particular systems or processes. But again, have an approach on how we review these things, how we tweak them, how we update them, how do we communicate and have this sort of cadence with our team, from communication to accountability to follow up in a manner that it's like everybody coming to the table having dinner and staying on the same page versus feeling like you have to micromanage people or walk away with this frustration like, man, I just wish they got it. I wish they just understand it. Mm-hmm. So maybe stepping back and saying, well, maybe there's a different approach to helping everybody get it more consistently.
Yeah.
Right. So, because that's the fun of being a practice owner. Our job's to influence the team, not control the team. But interestingly, to your point, control has more to do with a level of competency, right? And consistency and proficiency, much like with inpatient care. Like, we can't control all outcomes, but boy, can we raise and hold the probability of positive, successful functional outcomes if we have a consistent approach to how we care and assess and reassess our patients, right? So it's the same thing in practice. It's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah. And I think what I tend to see, and I'm sure you might see this too, is that as a practice owner, because we've got so much time and skill and experience in patient care, that's an area that we gravitate to because we're familiar with it. We can, figure out some ways to deliver some better care or, implement a new technique that we've learned, right? But when it comes to the other parts of the business, that's sometimes an area of weakness.
It can be if we don't lean into it, right? So, in like everybody that plays sports, and I know we got a lot of practice owners there that play sports, so that's why I like making these kind of analogies. But the idea is to come back every season a little bit better than the previous season. First as an individual, then as a team, and so it may mean working on some fundamentals a little bit more, like a left-hand layup. If you're a righty, feels awkward for a while, but you get your reps in. You start getting the repetition, and then you start fine tweaking it. And maybe you've done that after working with someone too, so you're getting some feedback. You get to have some model learning where it's like, all right, show me that again. Let me see. Okay, I see how you're taking off on that foot versus the other foot. And you start making it your own. And so similarly in practice, as leaders and practice owners, we're guiding the group and influencing the group to make these tweaks and updates and adaptations to our growing practice.
Definitely. And so, we've been talking about systems and how important they are to put into your business. So what would you say are some of the top systems that you want a practice owner to really look at improving?
Yeah. Well, two. I'm going to start with marketing, and just because that's your forte too. And I think it's a fun conversation. But at the end of the day, we've got to make ourselves well known out there and well thought of, right? The ultimate fun is creating this sort of omnipresence kind of vibe where it creates in the public, where they're like, man, I feel like I see and hear them everywhere, and that's when you've got a really tight system, multifaceted. Very scientific approach to it. It's not a guessing game. You're reviewing the metrics on it, right? Or key performance indicators, statistics. There's a lot of different words for that, but just having some data, some numbers to view off of. Okay, the more energy I put into this, it seems to generate more. Maybe I should put a little more in this. Let me look over here. This one's not performing quite as well. Should I tweak it, change it, or scrap it altogether? that's a really great approach when it comes to marketing, versus sometimes I think there's some really good marketing from other firms that make it seem like that's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I don't want to name any particular examples on that. But there are some things out there that aren't going to cut the mustard and generate those new patients, or put our reputation out there in a good way, that connects with the public.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a key thing with marketing, right? Is that sometimes we chase the shiny object.
Yeah, that's right. What's the next popular thing?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so we think that, this Instagram ad's going to fix everything in my business, right? But it's not, right?
Or
it's
worse, what's ABC Physical Therapy doing? I saw them doing this. Maybe I should do it too.
Yeah.
That's not. Now we're getting away from our game, which I always like to honor the origin of why a practice owner goes out on their own. They've got a vision and an idea on how they think physical therapy could be delivered, and they like the idea of being their own boss and creating their own destiny and future and vision, and they want to actualize that. So none of that within that origination has anything to do with I aspire to be do everything what these other places are always doing.
I think the thing that I always hear is I want to treat my way.
Yeah.
That's why people go on their own, because they want to be able to deliver a certain level of care, or certain things that they, maybe had a not so great experience in whatever they might have worked, and they think that it can, be better in the way that they want to approach it. So it's kind of, like you said, honoring that, and then being able to deliver, upon that. But I really like what you said, Derek, because I feel that's where sometimes when it comes to marketing, that in conversations that I have with practice owners, is that they need to come back to that part. How are we getting our name really together? How would we want people to think of? That's really your brand, right? How other people think about you. And so how can you develop that part of it? And then, yes, you've got technologies and mechanisms to get that, distributed as far as you can, and be in people's, different spheres of influence. But it comes back to, how do you want people to really think about your clinic and what you stand for?
That's right. So being able to reflect and be authentic, work through the discomfort of sometimes, it is a little funny sometimes talking about ourselves or looking at ourselves on how we want to portray into the public. But, when you're able to do that, you can be authentic and remain true to yourself. So, 1, 5, 10, 20 years of private practice, you're feeling like you're being yourself. There's nothing more uncomfortable than being someone you're not. And I love when I work with practice owners, reminding them of that. Let's make sure this thing expresses the true you, and the team is going to follow your lead. They're going to be influenced with your style, and they're going to align with your philosophy, your approach, and your system, because they see themselves in there and see themselves being able to win. And winning is totally linked with morale, right? And morale is linked with the degree of organization set up. So if the practice is not as organized, some people are going to be more not happy and down more often than not. But so that
people want to be on the winning team.
They want to be on the winning team, and winning teams don't always have perfect records. Right. Winning just has more to do with let's win more than we lose. Right. Let's make more shots than we miss. Right. If we can get to the promised land playoffs, great. That's actually excellent. If we win the championship, OMG, that's amazing, right? And so what's our championship in private practice? That's up to the practice owner to identify what their trophy is, or their cup, et cetera, right? So therein lies the second thing, other than marketing, I think it's player development, team development, role clarity, organizational development. As we grow, what's the approach to, tweaking, sometimes finessing the roster a little bit, for lack of better words, the group of peeps, and who's doing what. And as we get bigger now, do some people who used to do some things don't have to do all those things, because now we're larger and we can give some of those things to someone else and create a new position. Then we go and open a new location, approach to organizing that so that new location feels like the original location rather than a distant copy of, right?
Yeah.
Because we want our patients to experience a similar experience in each location. And then how does that all tie to the money line, which we do need to think of that as practice owners? It's our fiscal responsibility to make sure our practice has money left over after all expenses. And so having an approach to organizing that in the spirit of this organizing and systematic approach to playing our private practice game.
Cool. Yeah. So marketing, team development or organization, and finance, right? Those are kind of like there's three major critical areas. And again, we like to, as practice owners, we like to gravitate on that, clinical aspect, right, of developing and treating there. And then we're really a lot on the money, right, and insurance issues, or how that's getting billed, all those kind of things. And obviously then looking at your numbers and working at profit ratios and things like that. But
yes,
I think you got those kind of core three things, but then there's what are the systems within those core three things, right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's fun, and I think that's the spirit again. Like we'll have more fun in our practice as we, continue to develop, and always make sure we're learning as much as we can. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of that this week, and I'm sure like a lot of us enjoying the Independence Day week, families visiting, and I have my nephews visiting. And I don't know if you ever play younger kids in video games, but they are really good, and so I'm getting smoked playing video games against my nephews. But it occurred to me, like they're getting their repetition in, and they've got the knowledge how to win these games. Right. And so they're having a blast. They're laughing at Uncle Mike because they're beating my pants off. I'm not having fun because I don't know what they know,
Right.
But I thought to myself, if I spent a little time leaning in and learning what they know for an approach, a strategy, the kind of the ins and outs, nuances, a little more knowledge on the game, I'll probably win more, and I'm going to have more fun. So, applying that to private practice, that's really something we can all walk away as practice owners thinking about, right?
Yeah.
How can we go seek to develop and learn a little bit more and connect with people who have walked that path too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely. And so, Mike, you have a wealth of knowledge here. And so if you can kind of help us understand the importance of systems and how you were able to, like what you had to look at in your business, because you went from one location to 15.
I know.
So that's a tremendous increase in like lots of moving parts, different people, things that were happening. So like in general, like what were some of the things that you had to cope with in looking at the system improvements across that big spectrum of 1 to 15 locations?
Yeah, I think on the spirit of control and organization, it starts with us. So it's building some healthy routines and rituals, and putting some time, creating the time to work on our business. So I think something happens as a practice owner where it becomes very obvious we need to start to carve out some time to work on the practice. And you can block that time and call it owner admin time. But it's basically a way to discipline yourself and create the environment to support, like, I have to put time aside to work on my business, to look at some boring reports, maybe have a couple undesirable meetings, but it's all part of the bigger picture of running a successful practice. And so if it becomes a routine, just like we approach patient care, you get your reps in and you get your rhythm and your flow, and then it's fun,
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that's just, the highest priority. And I think it starts with just put 1 hour a day. If you're the type of practice owner that you're scheduled to the gills all day long in patients, start 30 days out and just schedule 1 hour a day as if that was a new patient. And so like we're sitting here in early July, not sure when this podcast will launch, but regardless, so let's just say then August, that schedule's sitting pretty, having 1 hour a day called owner admin time. And then you run with that for a quarter, and then maybe you progress it to 2 more hours. But I think, the rest of the answer is it's all systematic approach, right? It's all taking steps.
Mm-hmm.
And as practice owners, reminding ourselves that we're playing the long game. So sometimes I know we want to win today, but much like the championship coach, like they know there's a whole season. So, okay, team, maybe there's a couple games, maybe a month that hasn't been so hot, but let's take a step back and get to work. And that's where, practice, right? You get into practices. Our practices owners is put some time aside for us to work on our game, stretch it out to work with our team, expand out and not just limit ourselves to developing our skills on the clinical side, but on the professional development side. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff I have a lot of passion on, is working with practices and helping them develop their teams with their professional competencies, like communication, like leadership, just to name a few.
Is that something as you've worked with, especially probably clinic owners that are maybe one location and they're trying to grow, right? Is that something that you see where sometimes it's hard for the clinic owner to let go and empower the others to really, thrive and bring in there? Is that something you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the mindset is we do it the best, and we do.
Yeah.
That's why we're the owners, but again, if we want to have a lifestyle of balance, at some point, we've got to start to empower the team, develop the team. And that's actually how you're going to win the championships. I mean, anybody that knows about Michael Jordan, he didn't start winning championships until he could trust people like John Paxson, Steve Kerr, role players. And so who are our role players? And yes, we can have our superstars like our Scottie Pippins and Horace Grant and Dennis Rodman, but by and large, we've got to trust the team and spend time with the team, developing the team. And we can do this in steps. Like, it doesn't have to be starting tomorrow, but again, play the long game and have an approach, right? So that's where, I'll work with clients through executive coaching, where we get a strategy, just like if you evaluated a complex patient with multiple body parts, we're not trying to fix them in day one in 1 week. We're making a whole plan of care.
Yeah.
And it's similarly, what is going to be the approach to strategic planning, execution, follow through, and coordination and empowerment of a team. So it's not all on us.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I think what's interesting, if you kind of take a step back and just look at the business world, right? And you look at where the franchise model has evolved over, say, the last 20 years, right? And it's kind of predominant in today's world, right? In terms of franchise. And like, why does that work, right? Because it's the systematized process of whatever that franchise is, that someone else is able to go in, take ownership of that, and they've got everything that they need to start rolling with. They've got marketing, they've got processes, they've got accounting and billing, like all that's kind of rolled in. And so I think, people that strive out on their own, if they can look to that model, like, how do these franchises, how have they done it? Well, it's because they've really systematized the things that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I read somewhere, on that topic, like simple scales, and fancy fails. Like, so keep things simple as you're scaling, keep revisiting how you approach the game, and look at where you can modify, tweak to keep it tight and easy to understand and follow for the rest of the group without like needing a whole multiple page kind of key to decipher it. And then, so it's not too fancy or too complicated. Right. So
I think that's golden. Say that again, Mike. What was that?
So I can't take credit for it. I read it somewhere. And I'm sorry, I don't have the source in front of me, but it just reminded me, simple scales, fancy fails.
Like it. I like that.
So keep things simple.
Yeah.
And I think our elementary school teachers would hammer that in our heads too, right? Kiss it. Everyone's like, kiss it. They're like, yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah. Awesome.
Keep it simple, silly, right?
Right. Yeah. And so, we know that we have to have systems. As you start to work with practice owners, what are some of the like key measures that you look for a clinic to get control over? Yeah.
So to talk in terms that we know, when we approach patients, we kind of run the gamut of seemingly the same things that we're measuring, right? Range of motion, strength, balance, like tissue quality, and then maybe like posture, right? Alignment. So we got like 5 things that we really hammer home, and there's more, but we seem that those are like our starting 5, right? So with private practice, I think, visits, new patients, arrival rate, referrals, collections. I think that's your starting 5. Referrals are great because they're going to tell us trends, patterns, indicators that, the new patient trains come in. And then that we know that trickles up to volume in the form of patient visits. Arrival rate, we always want to be tracking, like, how well are we doing keeping patients on the schedule so it doesn't look like Swiss cheese when we come into work, and the scramble to try to fill the white space. And then collections, we do have to make sure the bloodline of the companies is smooth and not obstructed, right? We cannot pay bills, pay our team, pay the rent, pay ourselves if the collections aren't there. So the prediction is today's volume is in 4 weeks, give or take, paycheck to the company. So how we organize today, a lot of times we don't see for 4 weeks or so. And that's the same with marketing, as you know. Stuff we do today, we may not see the fruits for 4 to 6 weeks. But then we know too, as we stay disciplined and we stay consistent, we'll see that exponential growth too, month over month over month, as you push that out 4-6 weeks out.
Out of those 5 kind of key metrics there, what is there a common couple or 1 or 2 that you see most practices have problems with? Where do they seem to struggle the most?
The arrival rate.
Yeah.
They struggle with that because many don't have a consistent, systematic approach to how they're managing the caseload. Maybe they have clinicians that got a pretty good handle on it, but the admin staff don't. And the reality is we're a team and we need to be together on that. Or we might have a few high performers on the clinical team and then a few lower performers that we wish just could read our minds and know how to do it. But there is an approach, there is a training for that. There's a way to do that, and then to keep a continuity. And then the other one is how we're generating new patients. Where I see often with practice owners, they sort of ride these waves where there's a lot of marketing activity when the referrals are down. And I know you hear of this too. Mm-hmm. And then when they're sort of soaring and sailing, they kind of back off everything from a marketing standpoint. And, it's just not a fun roller coaster. So if there was a way to keep a consistent energy and attention and flow, conceivably there could be a consistent energy, attention, and flow with how new patients are coming to our practice. And that's a lot more enjoyable ride. I don't know if you've ever spent days, at an amusement park, right? But if you're on roller coasters a lot, it's queasy, man.
Yeah.
It might be fun and exhilarating in short bursts.
Yeah.
It's not cool to be doing that long term. Like when we take the kids down to the Universal, I mean, after like 2 or 3 days, I'm done.
Right.
Day 1's the best. Day 2, 3, I'm like, ooh, I'm ready. I love being with the family and doing something like that. But same thing in private practice. If that's the way they're the form of operating, month over month, year over year, they're going to be queasy. They're going to be anxious. Stress is going to be through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, it's funny you mentioned that because, we have clients and they're like super busy and like, we're so busy. Can we peel back on the marketing? I'm like, no, you can't stop. Because what's going to happen. They're going to start that dip on the roller coaster, and then it's a scramble to try and get things back up again, and that takes some time, right?
It does.
And I think you kind of alluded to the fact where sometimes, as business owners, we need, and this comes back to that reactivity, right? Like if we're not as proactive, we'll be more reactive. And if your new patients are low, it's a scramble, right? And that's not something that necessarily you're going to fix in a day, right?
No.
You got to have something consistent in place that you might take 3-4 weeks to see the fruits of that labor. Same thing with like collections. If we need money today, okay, there's things that we might be able to scramble to do, but it's still going to take a bit of time, right?
Yes.
So the ability to kind of step back from the business, look at the systems that are in place and have the consistency in those different systems, that's what brings about the control. And then the joy comes with that, right?
It does. And doing that over length amount of time, right? Because we don't want to start a lot of activity and then back off, or else, much like treating patients, you don't get a true reassessment on the intervention and the quality as such, right? So we've got to be able to stay the course. There's a way to slow the faucet down, but we don't want to shut faucets down when we're talking about putting systems in place.
Yeah.
That's like the equivalent of these pro teams that try to maintain a lead. They stop trying to attack and stay on offense. They're trying to hold a lead, and then they'll lose the game. So same thing in private practice. There is no maintenance. If you're either growing or you're shrinking, and it's way more fun growing. You can maybe influence the rate of growth, but you shouldn't fight it. It's a reflection of the good that you're doing in the community, the difference, the impact. The reason for the season of doing all this in the first place, right?
Absolutely. And so, speaking to our audience out there, if you were talking to practice owner that's feeling frustrated and they're not as happy as they were in their business, like what would you say to them? Like what would be like one of the first steps that you would say start looking at to improve the joy of owning their business?
Yeah, I would remind them that no problems are forever. I know sometimes when we're in the moment, it just feels like it's forever. So problems aren't permanent. Problems all have solutions. We reflect on like looking back on life, some of our greatest difficulties. If we're honest, we got through it. I mean, because like the reality is we're either going to figure it out or it's going to work itself out. It's way more fun figuring it out, right? Because then it's a little bit more control on it. But I'd remind them like that, no problems are permanent. But there's always the opportunity to look at our approach to dealing with problems. How can we get a little bit more separation from the problem so it doesn't bother us so much? We don't have to agree with it or like it, and we can have some emotion on it, but let's not let it totally dominate us. And let's kind of, much like with a tough case, that when we're treating a patient, we're kind of like, all right, I don't really know everything that I'm looking at yet, but we have an approach to how we're going to kind of try to solve the puzzle. And that's really how all these perceived problems are in private practice. They're just puzzles, but I'd remind them too, there's people out there that can help, that have walked that path, been there, done that. And remind them too, who are they keeping in their immediate radius, in their inner circle? I love this conversation about like, there's like our allies and there's our friends, and sometimes our friends can't be allies. Allies are always helping us move towards our goals. We can have like some really great buddies that we grew up with, but they might have no idea what we deal with and what we manage, and they can't identify with that. And so they'll have their opinions, and sometimes that can throw us off our game a little bit or get us to second guess ourselves. So it's like a reminder to, keep your friends, but keep your inner circle tight with who you trust to help you kind of manage your practice and manage your household and your trusted advisors, for lack of better words, right? Who you keep in your camp, because those are your allies. Their number one priority is to forward your goals, support you in every way possible, so you can always be moving forward.
Absolutely. And so just kind of coming back to the metrics part of it, again, sometimes what we see is that practice owners aren't as tight on those kind of metrics, right? You probably see that too. So what were the top 5 again that you were saying?
Yeah. So visits, new patients, arrival rate, referrals, collections. I think a lot of times they think like, I don't want it to be about the numbers. I don't want people to think it's about the numbers. And then I always remind them, you're just providing a scoreboard. It's all about the patients. Actually, it's all about giving them the best experience and getting them better, and then having a way to measure that. Like you could infer like, we're not really doing this as well as we could be if volume is just like on a downward trend. And the arrival rate, right? Like the cancellation rate is through the roof. I would step back as an owner and want to say, like, maybe there's some things we need to look at for the quality of the care intervention, and also the way we're managing these caseloads and how we're organizing our patients. Maybe even patient education points. Yeah.
And then for, because we talked about the arrival rate being a main problem area for a lot of practices, what would you suggest is a good arrival rate that practices should be shooting for?
I think the benchmark's 90 to 92%. As I look across the country, benchmarking 90 is very realistic. 92, you're starting to get, you're in that upper echelon for sure. And I've seen the 93, 94%. And here's the thing, it's not limited to the small practice. And I saw that just out of personal experience. As we grew the way we did, we actually did better the larger we got. And I feel that's because we have more champions and ambassadors like championing the systems and processes that get the wins, right? That get so and more people around to show and share, like, oh, hey, this is, try this, try that, because as PTs we're very hands-on as owners, as we learn a lot by doing. So we want to create an environment that everyone's caring enough to share the ways that work, and so it's capturing those ways that work, making sure it's crystal clear and simple for everybody else to follow, and making that so well known throughout the practice, so we have a consistent control.
Yeah. Mike, you've given us some amazing nuggets of wisdom here today. Do you have any final words for practice owners out there?
Well, first, I'd say thank you for what you do, because I know being a practice owner, our staff don't come in every day being like, hey, I just want to thank you for having this practice. But I want to thank all the practice owners out there, because it takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I think at the core of this beautiful profession at private practice is championing everything that's beautiful about our profession. But secondly, never be, too proud to reach for help. Reach out there, do some diligence, find out who some people are. If you think I'm one of those people, please reach out, reach to you. There's a lot of people out there that have walked this path that want to help and share, because we care about the profession. We care about society moving and being pain-free and healthy. So,
Awesome.
And help each other. Let's remember to help each other in this profession, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want to help practices in your same state, but maybe in the next state over, right? Like help each other, because this is a very nice community of professionals.
Cool. And so, so Mike, if, I would encourage our audience out there, if you're practice owner, if you're looking to grow your practice, if you're looking at, that you could do better with the systems in your business, it'd be great if you connect with Mike and NULA Training Systems. Definitely check them out. So you can go to NULA, that's NULA, trainingsystems.com. That's NULAtrainingsystems.com. I think, Mike, if they want to reach out to you too, they can just fill out the contact form on there, or even just email you. I think it's NULA, NULA at NULAtrainingsystems.com. So that's the best way for people to reach you, Mike?
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So check out, Mike's got some great training systems there. He's an awesome coach and consultant to the therapy world. So definitely take a time to check out Mike and what he has there to help you out with your business. So thanks, Mike, for being on the podcast with us here today. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. And I love your energy and your wisdom here. So thanks for sharing us.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for what you do too, man.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.